everyone, and welcome back to Life Unpotted. We're so happy you're here today, and we're excited to share this conversation with you. Something that I've been thinking about recently is this conversation we have with all of you. It's very intentional, and I believe that with intentional conversations and spaces, it's nice sometimes to not only create a bubble or a box around you mentally, right? To create space for yourself. But I think it's fun to get creative around the ways in which we do that. And something that I've always been drawn towards, always have had like a creative fascination with, and have always loved exploring, was making beverages. And I don't necessarily mean alcoholic beverages. I mean fun, tasty beverages that are healthy for you. So you may refer to this as a mocktail, but it can really be anything, right? So what I want to start doing for each of our episodes, I want to open with letting you know what drink we're having today. I think this is a creative outlet for me. I love drinking things that make me feel good, that taste good, and overall are just fun. And I think it's fun to set the tone with a fun, new, explorative drink. So we'll let you know what we're drinking. We'll go ahead and share the recipe on our Instagram if it is a concoction of that sort. And I'll let you know that today what we're drinking is, if you've ever been on TikTok, it is something called the Sleepy Girl Mocktail. And basically it's a mixture of tart cherry juice and literally just sparkling water and lime juice over ice. And it's really tasty if you like tartness, which I do. It's not really sweet, but more tart, and of course a little carbonation. And it's a pretty heavy drink. There's some complexity, but I don't know how in depth we're going to get here with the complexity of the cocktail world, but nonetheless, it's a fun drink. And we actually had it last night before we slept. And the whole point is it helps promote really deep, healthy sleep. And I don't know if it was a cocktail or not, but I definitely felt really relaxed and sleepy and had a really good sleep. It is 3:00 here while we're recording this now. So we'll let you know at the end of the episode how we're feeling after we drink it. So Sophie, let's take a cheers and start the episode.
All right. I'm kind of feeling already pretty sleepy, so hopefully this doesn't make me
Hopefully
more
not.
sleepy. All right. Cheers to intentional conversation. All right. Well, cheers to that. It's interesting because I've been feeling really caught up in my mind because right now I don't know if I have a cold. I don't know if I have allergies, but I just don't really feel great. And it's interesting to watch my mind want to fixate so much on the experience of not feeling good. All of a sudden, it becomes my identity. I just don't feel good and I need to talk about it. I need to complain about it. And I think experiences like this where we don't feel good, like body-wise, it's a good opportunity to become aware of our mind wanting to make a situation worse by dwelling on it. And we see this in so many different situations. And I've been becoming aware of this in my life of how much we just fixate on shit, how much we dwell over what's happening in the moment, so much so that we can't move forward because like that rock in the stream, we are just preventing the water from flowing. And the analogy of putting the rock in the stream, what that reflects in our life is our analytical mind trying to comprehend and analyze each moment as it's unfolding instead of just letting the water flow. So we had an interesting experience the other day because we had our friend visiting and we ended up taking a microdose of mushrooms. So I hadn't taken mushrooms since we went on that retreat in June. So I thought, we just took a very small dose. I was like, okay, we're going to go on a walk in this greenbelt in Austin. One of the things I really love about Austin is that there's so much nature here. So it's been really nice to have nature be so accessible. So we went on the walk and all of a sudden I felt like this wave of anxiety come over me. And I think this was happening as the mushrooms were starting to hit me. And I noticed my mind in that moment wanting to kind of panic about like, who am I? What am I doing? This kind of like really existential feeling that I think we all experience about who are we and why are we here and how is it possible that I have two eyes and a nose and a mouth and hands and feet. And I really became aware of like my base state in that moment to really be so like kind of clenched up, kind of so tight and just so not, I don't know how to explain it. just not feeling like I was accepting the moment, feeling like I was doing everything I could to fight what was happening. And eventually, like, I started just kind of being like, okay, it's okay. You don't have to listen to those thoughts. Like, don't feed into the anxiety. And we found this really big rock and we all laid down on it. And it was really interesting because I really noticed how hard it was to just let go. And I really noticed how hard it was to just relax. And what mushrooms really do is they force you to relax, which I think we talked about in this on, I think it was last week's episode, of like why it is so hard to relax. So I think that experience was really interesting because it reminded me of how my base state most times is not relaxed. And my base state is one of trying to control life to the point where I can't enjoy life because I'm so caught up in trying to control it.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because I think that is applicable to a lot of things. And I almost want to apply that to something you wouldn't think about. So I think that analogy with like the rock and the water, it's good. I think a similar analogy of like how tight are we holding on is a good analogy of when you're holding on really tight, water can't pass. So things can't change. Things stay the way they are. And there's a lot of resistance versus when there's a loose grip, all the things are moving through, the good, the bad, things are changing, things are happening. And I think that's how life is supposed to be. But it had me thinking about just us starting this conversation, something as simple as that. This is our 4th time recording, and we've mentioned this happens several times, especially when we record on a weekend. But us coming in at very different angles, me having worked through whatever I was feeling and feeling really excited and ready to record, feeling energized, and really being fixated on how things are going to go. Well, the reality is I'm not a solo podcaster. So we have to work together to make sure that there's going to be a positive outcome, because this podcast is all about letting go and just showing up how we are and not resisting. And I certainly was resisting the approach you were coming at from where you were just kind of tired, you didn't feel great, and you were working through that. You were going to have to show up in a more vulnerable way. And I was resisting that because I don't want to become vulnerable because I feel great. And I think that's an interesting thought process of, I feel really good right now, so I'm not going to be vulnerable. I should only be vulnerable when I'm feeling soft. But I think it's easy to get on the page of getting fixated on certainty in a new way, such being, we're having a lot of insights about the podcast right now. I'm feeling really inspired and really excited and really motivated. I have a lot of energy because of that. So it's interesting to think, what's the downside of that? Am I putting too much energy and focus and thought into this when what I'm looking at, which is Sophie in front of me, saying, no, I'm in a vulnerable place, so we're going to come at this from a vulnerable place. Well, that means, okay, I guess I have to soften a bit. Why am I so afraid to soften? Why do I not want to soften when things in my mind are going so well, right? I think it's an interesting thing to think about of, we don't want to soften when things are going so great, but what's underneath that layer of things are great, I don't want to soften? What's underneath that, right? Why are we afraid to soften?
Well, the first thought I just had, that if things are actually great, then there's no fear of softening. Because I think when we're scared to let go, and I think I've seen this in times where, like, I'm in such a good mood, I feel really good. Oh, I don't want to be upset. I don't want to see that. I don't want something to then change my mood. And it's so interesting when you think about how we really get into these habits of, like you said, grabbing on really tight of the current state that we're experiencing because we are so scared of losing it in a way. Like, we're so scared of what will happen if, for you, you're in this quote unquote good mood right now, and you're so scared of what will happen if the mood I'm in, which is, I've been really tired. I don't know if I'm sick. I don't know what's going on. Or maybe my energy just isn't where it normally is. And that's okay too. But I think the interesting thing is when we kind of start to feel frustrated by other people who are not matching our energy, because we almost want them to do it in a way to then, I don't know if it's validate the way we're feeling, but I think the main thing is if they don't, then that threatens our state. So I think it's really about asking, okay, are you actually feeling really good? Or have you attached to a feeling state, gripping this new feeling state because you feel so good to finally feel excited about something that you're clinging so hard because you're scared if you let go of that grip, what if I don't feel this way again?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think that for me, a larger part of it is clinging on to the idea of success with the podcast. And in my mind, fighting this, oh, the sound, Sophie just took a drink of water, so there was a sound there, and that's not perfect, or we don't have mic stands, so the sound is going to not be as good as it could be. And really getting fixated on these things and wanting to control them. I think it's interesting because we get this idea of perfection and thinking that everyone wants to see something perfect, and I can only have value and success if this is perfect. But time and time again, I learn that what it is people like to see imperfection, because that is what allows people to soften. And that's what allows people to leave this idea of themselves and let go of everything, positive and negative, right? Because no matter how tightly you might be holding on to something that feels so good, like I am in a great mood right now, feeling really great, but in a way that is superficial, because I feel like I'm afraid to let go of that by mirroring what you're feeling. So it's funny because really just being and not being affected by the mood of others or the energy of others, that's when you're really free. You're not free when you're afraid of losing how you're feeling because you're holding on to something. But letting go of that and simply just being, nothing's going to feel better than that.
Well, I think this is actually like a very, very interesting topic, one that is nuanced because there's so many different feeling states that we experience that we don't actually know what's happening. So for example, all of a sudden I start feeling really good because I'm drinking so much coffee and I'm eating sugar, or I'm going on my TikTok and getting dopamine. We enter this state where we think we're feeling good, but in reality, we're just still avoiding what we're actually feeling.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think when we try to hold on really tightly to these really good, quote unquote, feelings, we're still avoiding something inside of us. And that doesn't have to mean something that is imminent to come up. It just means we're avoiding reality. And I think this is a common thing on Sundays for people, like Sunday scaries. It's like you want to hold on to this moment because you're afraid of what's going to happen. And I was having this earlier. I was frustrated that we were podcasting because I wanted to do a lot of other things. And what I realized was that I'd woke up and we had immediately gone out to breakfast with someone. And I, not for 1 second, took a moment for myself to just decompress. And that's so important at times. And I don't know why I even said that right now, but I think the point is that we are always going to be in limbo between I like how I feel, I don't like how I feel. And the problem is when we start to judge that, we're always going to feel differently. And I think the more we're able to just accept however it is that we feel, we're going to get more immersed in the moment and we're going to enjoy the moment and not be focused on so many little details of ourselves.
Well, it's the classic thing of like either we're seeking something, we're trying to get something or do more of something to feel better, or we're trying to get rid of something to feel better. And I want to ask you a question. So we don't have to go in depth about your... Daisy's giving me a look of like, what are you going to ask me that you didn't tell me about beforehand? No, I think what I'm just going to ask is that we don't have to go in depth about like this exciting ideas you're having about the podcast, because that's going to come in due time. But what I want to ask is when you're feeling really excited about this new idea you have, right? What do you feel like then having that will give you? What do you feel like when you all of a sudden have this insight and this excitement comes over you? Is it simply that you're so excited because you truly believe in what it is? Or is there some level of excitement because a relief comes over you? Or is there some level of excitement because you feel like once that happens, you will maybe feel better. Like, is there any connection with that?
I think it's once you realize about.
Did that question make sense to you?
Yeah.
Okay.
It did. Yeah. And I have a pretty clear answer. And I think when you realize something that you're very excited about, you just want to get busy because it's exciting and it feels aligned and it feels connected. And I think it's interesting because a lot of the times the reason why we feel urgency to do things is because we think we're going to get our value once we achieve that. We're somehow going to be better once we achieve that. And sure, maybe there's a small dose of that in what this all is. But I think the 99% majority of it is that I'm just excited to create and to do this new project that we're working on because it is just really aligned and it's kind of everything I've ever wanted to do. And it's just kind of following the cookie crumbs of my life that's leading to this. And it's just exciting. I think it's just like truly pure, sheer excitement. So I think it's like toning that down and not feeling like you have to do it all at once. And I think that's an important reminder because it's okay. It's okay when things don't get done all at once. But it's also really important to remind yourself that things happen in due time.
Well, I think there's also an interesting overlap that I've experienced a lot in life of like anxiety / excitement. Like I've started to feel so excited about a potential new idea or a potential new opportunity that I remember vividly being like 22 or 15 in high school and finding out there's a party that was happening, or being 25 in New York City and getting invited to something. And I would feel so anxious because I just wanted to go. Like I just wanted that thing to happen. And I think when we're on a journey like we are, where we're building something and we're growing something, or you're just on a journey of life, it can be really, really easy, I think, to start subconsciously attaching to needing things to happen right away, because like we have to go deeper on this. I think there is always a level of urgency because we think that once we do that, we can relax, or once we do that, things will change. And I think I'm not talking about you specifically. I'm just talking about in general, like, how do we balance this line of excitement with I'm so anxious to do that because I'm fearful if I don't, or I need it to happen because I need it to make me feel better. And on very subconscious levels where we almost can't understand that's happening. Paint those two examples. What does it look like for someone who has a level of fear associated with it or anxiety? And what is the other situation where you're being driven by excitement, but it's not consuming you and it's manageable and you feel like it's not one that is linked to an external feeling state that will come from that thing you're excited about?
You want me to paint that picture?
Yeah, I'm curious.
Okay, well, I have a more interesting question in my opinion.
You don't have to respond to that.
So I think, in my opinion, what might be more interesting than that is thinking of someone who is really passionate about what they do. Like they're creating a clothing brand, or they're creating a podcast that they care about. Like something that is like super aligned, super pure. All intentions lead back to just self-expression, something that's really exciting. It's all good things. There's difficult challenges that come in, but for the most part, it's really exciting to see something come to life that you're really passionate about. Creative endeavors, or like I said, like creating something and putting it into the world. So take this kind of person as an example. Where do you draw the line of, like you said, not getting attached to something like that, not getting so attached and valuing your attachment to that at a higher level than your overall ability to be detached from everything? Like think about what I started off with the conversation, this idea that we have to let go of everything to feel the best possible thing ever. Like we don't want to let go of this good feeling, just how we don't want to let go of our passion project of what we love. How do we find the happy medium between being passionate about what we're doing and having motivation to do that, but also not overly attaching and getting all of our value from that? Because in my opinion, that is where you stunt with whatever it is you're building or growing, is when you look to that for a reaffirmation of where you're at and how you're feeling, you stunt your growth with it. I think your growth comes from having a healthy level of detachment from your core identity of who you are from what it is you're creating. Because I think that allows you to recharge, refresh, and just be. And that's where I think most creative ideas and just overall the best well-being come from. I think when we're able to have those moments, like when we are on microdosing psilocybin, we are just being. But at the same time, so many of our neurons were firing, if that's the right terminology. So much memories and all this stuff was coming up, but we were in such a relaxed state and it was a positive experience, and it was a healthy reminder of letting go and focusing on yourself. So I think all of this just to say that when you're in the midst of, whether you're in med school because you're passionate about it, or you're getting a degree in something you're passionate about, or you're building something that you're passionate about, there should always be a healthy level of detachment from that thing. Because at the end of the day, whatever it is that you're doing is truly just an extension of who you are, especially these things that are more connected, that are more holistic, that are more based on a spiritual or a medical or a connection of where you're helping someone else, or truly just being intentional about what it is that you're creating. It's just an extension of you. So you also have to take care of you yourself. And I think the best way you can take care of yourself is by truly letting go of everything, even the things that bring you happiness and joy, because it's in that moment that you're able to have total freedom and clarity to see the larger picture at play of the greatness and the ability to just be and to see our existence and how beautiful that is, right? Like, for all of you who have seen the Barbie movie, the scene where she realizes she's not human and how painful that is, but she realizes she wants to be human. Like, that reminded me of being on a deep psilocybin trip, and that deep spiritual gateway opens up, and there's just infinite love and beauty and memories and just connectedness. And I think that is the ultimate feeling that we always kind of come back to when we're taking care of ourselves. And I think that maybe is like what taps into spirituality and why spirituality is so important, because no matter what it is that we are creating, if we lose sight of the greater meaning, how great can it be what it is that we're creating? Shouldn't it be further tapped into this deeper level of helping others tap into this deeper level, right? So I know I just said a lot there, but I think at the end of the day, what we focus here on is this ability to live life deeply. So I think it's an interesting conversation to dance around, because yes, we are also creating something. And I think whenever you're creating something that has an impact on those who consume whatever it is that you're creating, you also have a responsibility and intentionality of saying, what kind of impact is this going to leave on someone? And it can only leave as deep of an impact as you're able to go with yourself. And I think that's where we're at. You know, I think we really were reminded when microdosing on psilocybin, the realities of there is so much more that we never tap into. And that some people never tap into this greater, higher power of something that is beyond us and how we all got here. And I think that it's just nourishing and recharging to reconnect to that, because it's the reminder that there's nowhere we need to get. Everything has already been created. And I'll cue Sophie. I know she wants to read a line from a book.
Yeah, that was all beautifully said. It made me think of, so I'm reading still Power of Awareness by Neville Goddard. And he talks about, I'm just going to read this line, and I want to explain how I think it connects to what you're saying. Creation is finished. Creativeness is only a deeper receptiveness for the entire contents of all time and all space, while experience in a time sequence actually coexists in an infinite internal now. In other words, all that you ever have been or ever will be, in fact, all that mankind ever was or ever will be, exists now. If creation is finished and all events are taking place now, the question that springs naturally to the mind is, what determines your time track? That is, what determines the events which you encounter? And the answer is your concept of yourself. concepts determine the route that attention follows. So he kind of goes on to basically say that when we really zoom out and think about how Earth was created, for this example, let's just say the Big Bang Theory proves true. All of a sudden, space exploded and Earth came to be. You zoom back to that point in time, billions of years ago, and all the atoms and carbons that compose our universe came to be. And then you fast forward to 2023 and you zoom in to the micro level of Sophie, me, the host of this podcast, who is pursuing my dreams and have spent much of my life very caught up in the idea of Sophie, right? So everything that can ever exist already exists. I used to hear this and not understand what it meant, but now reading this book and just the journey we've been on, I really get it. Every single possibility from an energy level is here. Earth was created, like trees were created, humans were created, fish, the ocean, the sky, the clouds, that all happened at one point in time. And after that happened, yes, trees grow, humans evolve, we're constantly evolving, but we're evolving from that same source of creation. We're evolving from that time in space when everything came to be. So because creation is finished, because there was only one time where the Big Bang happened, because all the atoms and particles that exist on our Earth will always exist on our Earth and can't be created nor destroyed. So when you think about pursuing your dreams and you think about building the life that you want, and you're somebody who feels really anxious about it, you feel this desire to do it and you feel really stressed and you feel really frustrated, there's a part of you that believes it's not possible that you can achieve the life that you want. And this in turn leads to a lot of outward stress. It leads to frustration. It leads to a sense of urgency of needing things to happen right now. A sense of urgency of needing to rush things through, or competitiveness, or cheating your way through, or doing everything you can to get the thing that you want. So basically, you have this person who's constantly trying to redesign their external world to do everything they can to achieve the thing that they want. But what they don't realize is that there is actually nothing you need to do on the outside. Like, everything on the outside is done. Creation has finished. The most abundant of energy is here. It's around you. Look around you. You'll see that. How did those trees get here? How is that sky blue? And how are those clouds in the sky? Right, because creation's finished. It's not like the Big Bang is continuously happening, right? So the point I'm trying to make clear is that he goes on to then say, so if creation's finished, basically, how do you then get what you want? And he says, well, it's about redefining the concept of yourself. It's about really diving within and saying, how am I showing up in the world? What are the fears that I have? And the reason this connects, I think, to what Daisy was saying is that, like, when we're and I spent a lot of my life thinking about myself only. Honestly, I think that we all are selfish because we grow up in a world where things are so competitive and we're told you have to get this job, you have to do this thing, you have to succeed, you have to be best in your class. We're told that we have to compete relative to our peers. And I think for the first time in my life, by creating this podcast and this brand, I understand what it means to have a purpose and a mission that goes beyond making myself feel good, that goes beyond wanting to just make money and buy a car and buy a house. Like, sure, those things are great and those things will happen, but that's not what this is about. This is so much larger than any of that. And I think the reason why we all struggle so much when pursuing our passions and building a brand or moving up in our careers or whatever it is because subconsciously, the only thing we actually care about is ourselves. Like, subconsciously, the only person we really care about is ourselves and our family. And because of that, we end up doing so many things to try to get what we need to get. And I truly believe, I'm starting to really believe, and going back to what Neville says, in order to really get what you want, it can't be about you. You have to let go of the idea of yourself. You have to let go of so many of these things. And I'm really not sure if this is making sense, but basically, if creation is finished, the universe was created, and you want to do all these things, it's simply just about tapping into that energy state of abundance. And if you're thinking about yourself only and thinking about this idea of yourself and constantly fixated on you, that's going to lead to you acting in a lot of fear. It's going to lead to you being driven by this sense of urgency to accomplish things because you're so worried about how it's going to make you feel. But when you let go and you tap into this deep, deep, deep knowing of, oh, right. And I had this recognition last night where I was like, oh, so creation's finished, which means everything I ever need already is here. I don't have to stress. I don't have to worry. I don't have to be nervous because it exists already. What I want, the life I want, literally on an energetic level exists already. The only thing I have to change is myself, the concept of myself. So let me know if that made sense, and in relation to what you were saying about those two different people who are striving, one out of fear and the other who just is simply let go and goes, this is just part of the dance. Let me just tap into that flow.
Absolutely. And I think as you were saying that, it totally does make sense. I always notice this. Outside of our window, there is this tree, and I don't know what kind of tree it is, but the wind is blowing and it looks like all of its little leaves are waving. And I often look at it and it is just so beautiful. But with what you were saying, Sophie, looking at that tree, it made me think there is so much beauty in this world. And I think oftentimes if we think there is nothing but hate in this world, we need to tune in what we're consuming and what we're watching and what we're looking at, because whatever we fixate on is going to become our world. But going back to what you said, I think that it kind of takes a level of being tapped into something you're passionate about to also let go. And let me flesh that out a little bit. I think that, and this is maybe unique to me, I'm curious. I would like to interview other people who are creating things that maybe isn't necessarily in the wellness space so heavily. But I feel like for me with this podcast, something switched where it was no longer about me, because my intention with starting this podcast was learning to let go of the idea of myself, to say, you know what? I don't know how I'm going to sound, but I'm just going to talk through everything, because I know that the number one thing that will make this not a good podcast is by me getting in the way and shutting myself down from allowing whatever is in me to come out in a verbal flow. And there was a point somewhere along, maybe it's when we started the community series, of me realizing, oh, people actually listen to this and they value it. And it does make maybe just a subtle impact on their day. Okay, when I'm editing and it's 9:30 at night, or when I'm in mid-conversation with you on a podcast and I feel frustrated, it's all about thinking about the person who's listening to this episode, and how by letting go of the idea of myself and how I think things should be is going to allow me to show up more presently, to create more quality work that's going to be more helpful. And I think for the first time, and I think a lot of the time people say, oh, having children, that allows you to not think about yourself, to think about someone else before you. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And I also think there are other ways to learn how to think about others before yourself, to be selfless in some ways. And I think kind of with what you were saying, when we work jobs, we hate to buy things we don't need, that we think we need, that we think that are going to make us happy. It's so easy to fall into this cycle of, I hate what I'm doing. I get to go buy myself something. And I once had a sales manager tell me, working in sales is really hard. Working the quota cycle every month is really hard. You got to find a way to reward yourself. I knew someone that would reward themselves by buying a brand name purse every month when they hit quota. And I remember hearing that and being like, I'm going to try to reward myself with a trip when I hit quota. But looking back on that,
what kind of trip?
A vacation.
I just want to clarify for the audience.
Yeah, vacation. Thanks for clarifying. But interesting because when you live your life that way, where it's always thinking about me, where am I at on the board? Where am I at? Where am I at? Where am I at? Okay, now that I hit that, how am I going to reward myself? Okay, now how do I start over? Where am I at? Where am I at? Okay, now what am I going to get myself? And it's this cycle that keeps us thinking about ourselves. And that was always my experience with the workforce. And that was just simply my experience. I'm sure there are people who are a part of wonderful teams. And I think that's kind of an interesting way of looking at success within corporations is how good is your team? Are you thinking about the good of the team? Or are you thinking about the good of yourself? Are you going to be more impactful if you're thinking about the good of the team? I think that is oftentimes a great motivator for people. So I'm just kind of piecing apart the pieces of our mentality within work, because I do think oftentimes it is about yourself that you're thinking about. So I think it's just interesting to dissect our psychology, our mentality that we spend doing jobs on a daily basis and our connection to them. And I think I maybe have a cynical viewpoint because I've always been a purpose-driven person. So doing jobs that weren't purpose-driven were always difficult for me and I was always resistant to. And that's a whole other thing to unpack. But my point in that being is I would be curious to hear more from people who are in corporate jobs. And we have a friend who has reached out about this, and it's not saying that all corporate jobs are bad. That's never what I'm saying. I think it's a matter of questioning your mentality around what you're doing each day. And if it's thinking about other people or are you thinking solely about yourself?
Well, I think the reality of it is a lot of people are in pain. Everyone is in pain, right? So maybe it's become a lot easier for me to think about other people because I've healed a lot of the pain within myself, right? Like if we haven't really worked through these deep, deep emotions that we've been carrying our whole life, of course it's going to be hard to operate in the world and really be thinking about the person next to you and really wanting to send love to the person next to you. Because the way that we interact with ourselves is how we are going to interact with the world. So if you've spent your life hating yourself, if you've spent your life feeling so much pain and so much hatred towards yourself and the world and those who've wronged you and just everything, of course you're going to find it very difficult to let go of thinking about yourself and show up for other people because you're so freaking hurt. You are so hurt and all you need is love. And it's hard to give love to other people when we haven't given love to ourselves. And I think what I would say in two-part to someone who struggles to maybe think about other people is, number one, beyond simply connecting with yourself, because I think that's a prerequisite to everything, start making the effort to, when you see someone on the street or you come across somebody who might normally bother you or who might normally frustrate you, find the space within yourself to give them love. I remember there was this Tara Brach meditation I used to do where it was premised all about thinking about the whole world and saying, may you be loved, may you be happy. You would do the meditation first about thinking about people in your life who you don't have a good relationship with. And then you would do it thinking about people you do have a good relationship with. And then you would zoom out like the world as if you're looking down on earth, on space, and imagine the whole world if it was full of love and peace. And the more that we can cultivate that sense of love towards other people, even when it doesn't feel natural, you'll realize it is natural. It is in you. Like, we all have so much love to give. And I think as somebody who has felt angry towards the world in the past or felt frustrated or felt like people have wronged me or people didn't care about me, now I can look back and say I was living in a very myopic view, a very narrow-minded view of me, instead of saying, oh, that person might be hurt too. So I think this goes beyond building our passions. This goes beyond building a brand or building a company. I think this is the way we operate in the world in general, is that the more we can show love for other people, the more we'll be able to connect to ourselves and vice versa. So I think that I don't even know what this conversation has been about. It's been an interesting journey, starting it not really feeling great. And I think coming to the end of it and feeling more calm, I think. And just the importance of recognizing that there's so much more happening in life that our mind makes us think, and the ever-present beauty that's always there. And the reminder that you actually don't have to try that hard to live a life that you want, because everything that you already want has happened. So if that's the case, if you can fully sit there in this moment, whoever's listening to podcasts, and recognize from an energetic level, and that is not some siloed thing from your life, because you are made out of atoms. Your body, take a look at your body right now. Like you are made out of carbons and atoms, like stars are. If everything you want on an energetic level is already there, then you don't have to worry. And maybe your time is not spent so much on trying to force things into your life, but rather fostering a deep connection with yourself and to the world. Because as you do that, you will then tap into that energy that's kind of just been waiting for you the whole time.
I think that's a good note to leave it on. I think recognizing that you have the power to shift whatever mentality you currently have is. I think that recognizing you have all the power and you're able to create the life that you want. And I think that it takes time to do that. And I also think that it's a confusing thing to get over, and it's not a simple thing. And it's also not linear. It's going to be a journey of learning to surrender. And I think that honestly, that is something that is really difficult at times. Like, I'm judging the shit out of this episode because I feel like we have been on a trajectory recently of creating really great content. And I think the reality is we expect things once they start growing in a certain direction that it just needs to go up, 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 and up to the right. And maybe whenever it goes down just a little bit and dips, but then goes back up, like that's a bad thing. It's seen that everything constantly has to have some level of perfection. But I think one of the things I do like to challenge in this podcast is the need for that, is the need for everything to always be perfect. And if we're able to let go of that idea of perfection, are we ironically able to create a different type of level of perfection, if that makes sense? I think if we're able to let go of the judgments we hold of ourselves, if that's really what this is about, it's the palpable energy that we create for others. Is it really about ourselves in the first place? Is it about ourselves and our judgments that we have of this podcast? Is it that this could be a really great episode that in our perspective, or in my particular perspective, that I don't think it is? Does that really matter if someone else is going to listen to this with a different perspective? Because how can I ever know how anyone else is going to receive this? So I think interesting way to close the episode, right? Because I think it's important for me to always disclose how I'm feeling in the episode, because I came into this podcast episode feeling really excited and feeling really great. And I didn't want to face certain things of feeling frustrated and wanting certain things to be perfect. And I think that's what really came up, was that I feel frustrated that not everything with this podcast right now is perfect. I want everything to be in a fine, nice box and everything to feel really great. And I think the reality is that we're learning, and there's a level of grace we have to give ourselves with that. And there can be a detriment of being so hard on yourselves. And I think being particularly in this space of wellness, however you want to define that, is that really isn't acceptable to be hard on ourselves, because it kind of goes against everything that we talk about and that we share. And it doesn't mean that we're not going to walk into the wall where it's there. But I think that once we can let go of those ideas, we can kind of let go altogether. And that's the healing journey, I guess. I don't know if that's how we started this episode or if that was the past one, but the healing journey is always allowing things to flow in and to flow out, whether that be a positive energy or a negative energy or emotion. It's constantly happening, and nothing is ever going to stay for too long. And we have to get comfortable with that ever-changing flow of life, because that's where the power of life is that ever-changing flow, because we're not meant to stay the same as humans. We're meant to change. We're meant to grow. And that's going to be uncomfortable at times. That's going to be really exciting at times. But that's the point. It's to not stay the same. And it's just to be continuously changing and to accept that and to not hold on to something when it's good, because we know that it's going to come back at some point.
And maybe it's like about letting go of the idea that there's such thing as highs and lows. Like if everything is just happening on a neutral level in reality, like when we're so caught up on certain things meaning certain things and certain things being good or bad and an episode having to be a certain way or needing to come off a certain way, it's like there's fear there. There's fear beneath that of what's going to happen if that doesn't happen. And when you let go of all that, you're just going to be left with fear and anxiety that actually have nothing to do with what you're doing, actually are just emotions you're experiencing. And when you peel that back, you'll be left with a sense of relief of just being like, oh, I was just caught up. And I was projecting those emotions onto the thing I was doing. And actually, everything in life is constantly unfolding perfectly. Life is constantly unfolding perfectly. You are exactly where you need to be right now. And when we can recognize that and not resist that, well, we don't have to analyze every single moment that's happening because we recognize life is long, man. And with, like this podcast, we're going to be doing this for a while. So how much attention and fixation and frustration and analyzing do we have to place on 53 minutes of an entire career? How silly is that? So I think it's about recognizing that perfection is nothing more than a mental idea we've created, and become aware of your tendency to want to fall back into that, because when you're falling back into that, you're just falling back into misery. You're just falling back into resisting so much how things are going because you're so scared that they're not going to work out, because you're so scared of nothing. You're scared of nothing because there's nothing to ever be scared of. Everything works out. Everything will work out. So clearly there's a lot there. Clearly, you showed up in the beginning of the episode, you thought you were in a good mood, and I was kind of feeling tired. I think we maybe both are just experiencing emotions, because aren't we always? Is there such thing as a good mood? Like that becomes so fixed, right? And you can feel great one moment, not feel great the next, feel great one moment, not feel great the next. What if we just let that cycle be without needing to cling to one and needing one to be more permanent than the other? Because the reminder is nothing is permanent ever. I could keep talking, but we should probably close this out.
Well, I'll say I'm definitely feeling sleepy from that drink.
I've been feeling sleepy the whole time. So.
I feel, no, like it works. I feel sleepy. I feel like I could go take a nap right now.
Good to know it works. So
yeah,
to the listeners, don't take it in the morning before work. Maybe it's a good before bed type drink.
Well, let us know. You know, we never know how these episodes are going to be perceived by you all, so let us know. And also don't forget to write us in for our community series. Let us know if you have a life situation going on, if you have a life insight going on, if you're just wanting us to meander on a random thought or point of view. Email us. You can email us at info@livelifeumpotted.com, and we'll be more than happy to do a live episode answering or giving our insights on whatever your question or insight may be.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for listening. We look forward to continuing this podcast because it means so much to us. And it's always a vehicle for us to work through what we're experiencing. And we hope that you have a similar experience. So as Daisy said, check back in this Thursday for a community series. And until then, we'll talk to you on Thursday. Have a good rest of the week.